yeah.
I'm here.
I'd like to say I'm fresh on my way back from being in Sydney. But,
yes, how was that?
Well, the restaurant went very late, so I'm not fresh.
Yeah.
But it was wonderful to be on the plane again. One of the stewards who I regularly, when I'm flying between Melbourne and Sydney, when I used to fly regularly between Melbourne and Sydney, we both recognised each other. And it was sort of nice to say, oh, it's nice to you. She said, yes, Mr. Douglas. I thought, gee, nobody calls me Mr. Douglas. But that was really nice.
Oh, that's lovely.
And I thought it was a bit like Love Actually as people got on the plane. It was a reconnection to something some of those stewards haven't worked for 12 months. One of the men had only worked 3 times in 13 months. And people embraced them, they were not physically, but were really happy to see them. And flying over land, looking out the window, I was like a child, to be honest.
Oh, that's lovely. It's just by your description, it sounds as though it's just so nice to be here and just so nice to have, to be around it.
Oh, it is. And look, the thing that I don't quite understand, Karen, I walked in to have breakfast at my usual breakfast joint this morning without a mask, and I walked in with my hand over my face.
A free panic attack with you?
I'm really struggling to do things that I did before with ease. And as we flew back, I felt a level of comfort that we're returning to something which I'm familiar with, and that amenity that we enjoyed before. I wandered around Sydney for an hour just to walk around and be in Sydney, in between about 6 or 7 appointments. And I thought, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I just didn't think I was going to do it again. I don't know why my brain has sort of closed out that as an option. But anyway, look, we're back. Let's hit the ground on the vaccination status and talk about what's happening there.
Not much.
Not a lot. The Sydney case has now been lodged in the Supreme Court. There's no directions date for that at the moment. The Melbourne injunction failed dismally as we expected it would. It's due for hearing in early March, and again will fail dismally. And there is some usual protesters congregating on the steps of the Victorian
Not too far from us, actually.
Not too far. I can't see the signs out the window.
Is the gallows still there?
Yeah, the portable gallows could still be there. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure who they're for. But they're an interesting riffraff, weren't they? So anyway, there's still a few people sitting there as I drove in last night.
Yeah.
Nowhere better to go. All right, so as far as cases go, we have 2 really interesting cases. One, probably the first one, which is Shanks and Schwartz, is interesting in sort of retrospect of looking about what happened in stand downs.
Mm-hmm.
So as you all know, for a stand down to be effective, there has to be a complete stoppage of work and no other method of utilising someone. That's effectively what 525 to 526 the Fair Work Act says. In Shank's case, she was offered a variation of the contract. And for you and for the people who are out there, you'll know this was a common thing to do. We'd say to people, look, there's this amount of work to do. If you can vary your contracts down, if you can take leave, we can get through without it. Or otherwise, which this business didn't do, otherwise we'll chunk up the work into work where we can do and work where there is a complete stoppage. They didn't do the chunking up, and as a result, there wasn't a complete stoppage.
Mm-hmm.
And so the court said, look, this woman failed to sign the variation. She's one of 268 people, all of whom signed them. Her case is right. There wasn't a stoppage of work because there was work that could be done. Mm. But under 526, there's this balancing exercise you do as to, well, where is the loss and how should, if there is a loss, how do you pay it, from balancing the various interests that are involved? And they said, well, look, this was actually an employer trying to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. 268 people agreed to do the right thing, and your claim for compensation, no.
Yeah, it was hard to sympathise with that, really. Decision to raise that type of complaint, given the environment, the setting.
Yeah, and I think here's a case where you win everything and lose completely. Mm. So I know those lessons won't go out and employ land for people who feel they need to take stands on principle and do stuff which is inane. But the short answer here's a woman who's won the case, and lost completely, gets nothing. So I don't know why she ran it, but I don't know whether anyone ran it for her, actually. In fact, my recollection, they unrepresented, which was difficult. Next case is Chief Executive Officer, Department of Health and Wellbeing, and Visavanthan. And this shows how jurisdictions are different. Okay, and South Australia is an old common law jurisdiction. It's inclined to be much more technical in the way that it adopts law compared to the Victorian and New South Wales. I won't go into my other discussions about other jurisdictions, but both Victoria and New South Wales are very, very commercially sound jurisdictions, which are inclined to see a bigger commercial picture. South Australia, it's inclined to be more technical. This was a woman who, over a period of 6 years, raised concerns that her peers and people who worked with her were treating her inappropriately. She apprehended that she was being bullied. She raised and described it as being bullied. She missed out on a promotion, and she then made a claim under all safety legislation has an anti-discrimination provision. If you raise a safety-related matter, or if you're a shop steward and you're treated adversely as a result of that status or a complaint that you make in relation to safety, then there are individual, so this is a crossover criminal civil. There is a reverse onus which says individually the person who did it can be liable. It's around about $50,000 that you can, and for an organisation it's up to $250,000. We've seen the Patrick case and a few other cases. She won at first instance. So at the first court she went to, she got $115,000. Then she went on appeal and she lost. And the appeal's really concerning. Okay, there's part of it I do get, and which is quite valid, saying, look, all of that may have happened, but it wasn't part of the decision maker's mind in refusing your application for a higher job. Good argument, by the way. No complaints about that part of it. But then there was this odd piece which said the mere allegation of bullying doesn't make it unsafe. And it shows how we've been drawn to technicality rather than substance, because when a person repeatedly says they're being treated, they feel they're being bullied. Not a technical definition, but they feel it. There is absolutely no doubt that safety legislation says that is a safety complaint, even if it's not articulated in terms of, on this day, a person did this. So, an investigation, a complaint to be investigated must identify the person involved, the location, and the relevant time so that somebody can respond to it, okay? That's for the purpose of an allegation which goes to misconduct. But that's not what this case was about. This is a person's apprehension that they were being treated badly, and it was impacting them. And what is the real test when we look even at bullying? It is, for bullying, is that there are repeated actions. She repeatedly raised the way she was being treated. It affected her safety at work, and that it wasn't reasonable, that it hurt, humiliated, or intimidated her. So it mightn't have reached the level of being bullying, but the definition around safety is that you must do everything that is reasonably practical to prevent harm to somebody.
So
she's got harm.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got, under the safety system or safety obligations, you need to be able to identify and assess and manage those hazards, right? And those risks that arise from those hazards. Now, that's one part of it, to be able to identify that. Now, when it's being brought to you and say, I feel unsafe, then you've actually got to do something about that. Go out and investigate or substantiate whether or not, or assess whether or not there is an issue and deal with that appropriately.
And this is where the hole in this case sits, is that a person's been penalised by the inaction of its employer. So a person brings a claim saying, well, I was treated adversely. Now, let's ignore it for a second. If the finding is, and the facts are, there is no nexus between her complaints and the decision that's made, then she loses. But what I'm deeply concerned about, I guess, is, and this will always happen in technical jurisdictions, where they look at they drill down definitionally on a thing and they say, well, just because somebody says it's bullying doesn't mean it's safety. Well, let me just be really clear with you. When someone repeatedly raises the word bullying, I want you to think as a parent, when someone does that, when your kid comes home and says, I'm being bullied, more fool you for not saying your child's at risk, because it's screaming to you that this person is at risk, and your failure to do something about it has left this woman suspended in fear. Anyway, technical jurisdiction, Victoria, you would not have the same outcome, but really interesting, and will be misused repeatedly to say that the mere allegation of bullying doesn't give rise to a safety concern. If anyone comes to you and says, I feel I've been bullied, it is a safety concern. And you must do exactly what Karen said, which is go through the assessment and investigative process.
So with that, Andrew, it's really understanding that there's multi-dimensions in terms of an issue like this, and recognising that and being able to deal with each one of those appropriately.
And let's kick it around just for one last minute. Say she's wrong about this. What does that say about her mental health? And yet we have an obligation of monitoring health. So when a person says that I'm being regularly hurt, you go and look at the substance and you can't see it. it's telling you there's a problem with the person's health. And your obligation is, at that stage, to assess the person's health, because a person wouldn't repeatedly say they're at risk and feeling hurt unless one of two things: they were being, or they had a perception of it, which related to a health-related matter. Okay, so either way,
there's that, and there's also, but if you had a process and you had that framework and you work to it, it also demonstrates how, in terms of from the integrity of your framework and your governance and risk management, like that, it does so many good things for you, all the right things for you.
It does. And look, the other thing I'd like to say, after being out to restaurants 3 nights in a row and with another one tonight, my foot actually aching from gout, can I say to you, I'm raising this as a risk issue. If anyone would like to do the identification, it is the fact that everybody wants to go out to dinner before Christmas.
Yeah.
I need a break, Karen.
I think I need it more than you.
Yeah, when I'm talking to somebody with 3 children, 8 and under. Okay, I'm not going to complain anymore. All right, what I thought we might talk about today, because there is this nonsense going around about the Great Resignation is going to affect Australia. I just want to say to you, it is a nonsense in Australia, okay? It is just guff that's being peddled by sort of crazy tabloids because it sounds such an exciting thing to talk about.
Yeah.
It is true that in America, which has an entirely casual labour force, I'm not sure if you understand America, that the baseline employment standard is casual employment. And that's why enterprise agreements started there in 1930, to actually protect people. Okay, the first one was known as the Sherman Act that brought in, there's a whole lot of Sherman Acts, and there's actually a Sherman tank as well. But one of the first Sherman Acts that came in to protect employees was designed to build enterprise agreements so people could have leave. Okay, people could be sick. Because in America, everyone is employed in the casual unless you have an employment contract, which changes that, or you're under an enterprise agreement. Whereas in Australia, you're deemed to be a permanent employee unless you're defined as a casual employee. So if I employ Karen and I don't tell her she's a casual employee, she's a permanent employee. Okay, and that's why we've got our minimum standard of 6 months where you can terminate somebody on 1 month's notice, because we assume. The reason I'm telling you that is because when COVID hit America, people were treated shockingly. And there's also very little social security net in America, whereas we have a very strong social security net. And we had governments, all of them, despite the rebellious way they behaved together, all of them threw money both at business and people to try and fix things. It mightn't have been coordinated and there'd be a lot of criticism. But I'll tell you now, you live in the luckiest country in the world.
Absolutely.
Okay? That wasn't what happened in America. So people just turned up to work one day and were told to go home, and nothing happened. No one looked after them, nobody cared for them. For those who stayed behind, they were burdened with huge quantities of work. They weren't sent home with two screens. In so many cases, they were just treated abominably. Their workloads were increased, their health was ignored, and these people, and by the way, the Great Resignation is a very middle class concept, because it's a white group of people who are middle class who've been successful. They've gone, I don't want to put up with this shit anymore. This isn't about people who work at the Ford factory. They're not resigning. It's only a middle class professional group who are resigning, because they're saying, actually, when I was at home, I realised I missed my family. When I was at home, I realised without travel, without all these things, I don't earn a lot less doing something else. I never want to live this badly ever again. These were people who went through terrible deprivations after being quite well-to-do middle-class Americans who lived a good life, going, I don't want to be treated the way I have been. So it was a realisation, a cultural realisation, similar to what happened in the 60s, where a whole lot of Americans went, I don't like the rules that are being imposed on us. I don't think it's right. And we saw a cultural revolution that changed all of us, which led to the technological revolution of the 70s and 80s, because of that complete change of mindset. We're going to see that in America. Are we going to see it in Australia? Well, actually, Australian employers are incredibly good. Australian governments are very generous. A lot of people will say Australian employers, it's just not true. We act for you. And in every case, we've seen incredible generosity of spirit throughout stand downs, and the way people have behaved has been remarkable. We're an island state, and therefore in all skilled occupations, there is scarcity. So rather than seeing the Great Resignation, we're seeing some volatility where wages are being thrown at high-skilled production managers, professional class of people.
Technology, healthcare.
All those areas, there is scarcity because nobody can come into Australia. So we're not seeing a Great Resignation. We're seeing a struggle for retention. And it should be called the Great Retention, as people, like there's some law firms, two notable, who just went through 10% and 15% are all employees. Now, can I just say to you, that's sort of Dumbsville, because the answer is, it is nice that you go and say that, but that's a brand. Employees are thanking Australian employers for being loyal, committed and kind. And that's what you need to learn from COVID, is to respect flexibility and to build flexibility, trust and respect into a relationship. Yes, pay people correctly, but remember, in volatility and wages, they go everywhere. What's 15% one day is redundancy the next day.
Absolutely.
And what we'll see again with these mad wage figures is, as soon as scarcity's up, there'll be retrenchments. And guess what? They'll be buying people in at cheaper rates. So be careful of the dishonesty that comes about, where people throw money to pretend that's doing something good. What creates the great retention is great relationships and engagement. And money is part of that, but it is built around saying to people, Karen's a good person to say this to, how do we give you some freedom so that you have some time for yourself? Because what flexibility also does, it breaks down these slightly invisible barriers between work and home. And for you, it's been an incredible struggle, hasn't it? I'll get messages from you for 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning as you buy time for yourself with your own health. So they're the things which create retention. The throwing of money doesn't. So Australia's not going to see the Great Resignation. It is guff. Don't go to any Australian seminars that say it. It's junk. We live in an environment where we have permanent employment, where we have an industrial legislation that secures that employment, and a more diverse society that respects people who live within it and tries to do it. We're very, 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 very fortunate. So I just thought that's my little parable for the day about that. I won't belt away any more of the trash that goes on commercial radio and stuff about this, but that's me. On that, what we thought we'd do is then we'd get into culture as a retention strategy. I'll throw to you.
Yep, sure. Sophie, if you can load it up. Thank you so much. So, look, I want to throw the Great Resignation on its head a little bit and focus on what's really important here. This is not about even the word retention itself. This is not a way of how do we keep people for as long as possible against their will. I'm thinking, is it about that? No, it's about creating, and we can focus on creating an environment where people want to be there, they value and are interested in their work they do and the people which they interact with on a daily basis. They care about what they do and what the organisation stands for. I'm telling you now, it's going to be a lot more than 10 or 15% increase that's going to get them, to move.
Hey, look, can I just say, for our 2 organisations, your consulting business, we don't have any restraints against our staff.
That's right.
Because our view is, if you've got to hold someone against their will, that's actually called a prison. And we don't think we're a prison.
That's true. I can confirm that there is no restraint. So I can walk tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
So look, with that, a couple of elements for you to consider in terms of, well, we were talking about culture. What makes up this culture that will help feed into to retention, if you want to call it that. So one is around value. So we talked briefly about remuneration, making sure that crafting your remuneration.
Karen's second word. There's another word in the problem I put in there for Karen, by the way.
Okay, good. Crafting REM that recognises reward, performance and loyalty. Okay, so let's make sure that money isn't a problem. Sort that out. Okay, money and benefits, whatever that is. Connection, creating a positive sense of belonging to the team, to the organisation, to the work as well. I'm talking about the actual job that you do, so that people feel actually valued and respected. It's important to also to invest in people. So I'm talking about growth. Actively encouraging people to grow professionally, but also personally, supporting them. Okay? That doesn't mean like unlimited courses and big things like that. It doesn't. It's just are you creating an environment where people are better every day if they want to be better? Purpose. Are we energizing our employees? Are they understanding that, look, this is who we are, this is what we do as an organisation? Is there an alignment? Is there a connectedness to that? Our work, really what we're trying to say there is, our work is important. And your work is important. Certainty, providing the clarity and direction and support to help people do their work and contribute well and perform well. And lastly is care, and we're really big on this one, Andrew, is around establishing programs, resources, support a whole bunch of things, whatever like it involves. But how do we make our employees' lives better through health and happiness?
Yeah.
So that's me.
Yeah, and look, I can I just say one of the things that we've really struggled through lockdown is very obvious is the lack of certainty. You don't give people certainty, you create stress. You create stress, you get people into this sort of fight-flight place where they're not sure what they should be doing. Now, any of you who know this know fight-flight has 3 really obvious outcomes. One, it reduces executive function. So people's capacity to think when they're stressed is actually reduced. So not giving someone clarity means they won't be autonomous, they'll get lost. Secondly, it means they don't get any form of nuance from you. So when you say to them, oh, you're struggling a bit with this because I can really give you a hand, they're seeing that as being criticism. Because the third part of fight-flight is always the sense of defending who you are, feeling under attack. So all those things work really well, but if you fail in certainty, you fail completely.
Yeah.
And growth, connection, value, and purpose come from care. You and I can say anything we like, but unless you know that I genuinely care about you and I want you to be the best version of you, you won't be, because you'll continue to focus, as humans do, on productivity. And you'll focus on becoming more and more transactional rather than conceptual. And what that means is you'll end up with a very siloed workplace. So that's the layman's version of the psychology that sits behind what Karen's saying. But care and certainty are the absolute hubs of heart and productivity.
Absolutely. Agree.
All right, well, that's great, Soph. Thanks for nailing it. Let's bring up the next slide because we've got case study.
Oh, case study. Oh,
Karen and the case study. Go for it.
All right, let's go. Terry was a lead salesman at Residential Homes Investment New Order Proprietary Limited. Rhino. 5-letter word. That's great, Andrew. Look at the joy in his face. Look at it. He's just lighting up, right? So Terry, he reported to the head of sales and marketing, Sally, and managed a team of 6 salespeople who worked throughout Victoria. Terry had a large client base, but hadn't been able to break into any of the big building companies. As a non-drinker, he would say abstemious.
Word 1 for Karen for the week. Abstemious.
Okay, abstemious.
Can I just help there? Just abstemious.
Abstemious. Oh, thank you so much, my learned friend. Anyway, Terry was a very different person to his colleagues. They found him stiff and uncompromising with a holier-than-thou personality.
That's my word 2 for Karen.
I apologise on his behalf. He's behaving badly today. Terry spoke to Harold, the GM of HR at Rhino. He explained that he felt excluded and bullied by Sally and his reports as they deliberately arranged meetings at restaurants and hotels with operational staff, knowing his views about the service of alcohol during working hours. Terry complained that Sally was the one who authorises these meetings and takes some sick pleasure in how awkward it makes him feel.
Page 2. Soph. Nail it.
Okay, great. Harold investigated Terry's complaints and found the team loved Sally and her relaxed approach to client engagement and drinking. They struggled with Terry and didn't enjoy mixing with him. Sally had socialised her irritation with Terry and had intentionally made their Friday afternoon get-together at rowdy hotels despite him. Terry would attend for the client debrief early in the meeting, finished at 6 p.m, then made his apologies before what Sally called the team building part that commenced after 6 p.m. and involved drinking. Terry applied for the national manager role in February 2021 and was told by Sally that his lack of big client connection was fatal to his appointment. Terry pointed out that these were her relationships and she had never assisted with introductions. Sally angrily
said... Correcting my grammar now.
Okay.
Can you believe it? Can't say abstemious and corrects my grammar.
Yeah, great. Okay. Sally angrily said, do you think they would really like to meet you over at Mineral Water? They then alluded to his complaint against her by saying, and how could I trust you now to have my back? Wouldn't I be more at risk of you stabbing it? Gosh.
We're over to the poll.
Yes.
Okay, let's go. Thanks very much.
You're happy.
Where's the music?
You're having far too much fun with that, aren't you? Oh my goodness, there's music.
Go, we've got music. know you.
I will
I know
get
you.
you back.
I know you.
And then it's like, oh, great. How are you going?
Yeah, it's dark. I think the music's a bit dark. Yeah, it is very dramatic. I agree.
All right. So we've got most people.
Okay, let's go on the count of 5. Let's
Thanks, Peter.
All right, let's do it.
Got it.
What do I do now?
Press
end
poll.
poll.
Yep.
End poll. There we go.
And then click share.
What do I do now?
Click share.
I'm going to click share.
Yeah. Okay.
I can press stop sharing a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Terry commenced a discrimination claim under safety law, saying that both Rhino and Sally discriminated against him for raising a safety complaint. Would he be successful? Okay, so reverse onus under safety legislation. She has to make the allegation and they have to show that there was not part of their mental state in the decision making. Now, the fact is, this is a much harder question than you think. If she said that it related to his job, to the job that he was after, we have no evidence to suggest that he was done on the basis of merit. The only thing we have is Sally saying, I don't trust you, and making a clear allusion to the fact that he made a complaint against her. That would not in any way displace the reverse onus and they would be found liable. So the question that sits beneath that is, was it a safety issue that Terry raised? And in this case, it clearly was, because Terry could point to something that was in an investigation that Harold had undertaken. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this would be successful, and because Sally is liable, without any, the organisation will be liable unless they can show Sally acted so far outside of the rules and they couldn't have been aware of what she did. So both would be liable. And her senior role would make it very hard for doing it. So the answer to that one is yes. Does Terry have an adverse action claim? Absolutely. Much easier to prove, because all Terry has to raise in an adverse action claim is he merely has to say he has a complaint, a safety complaint. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have to be right. He merely has to raise it to kick off the action to be partially successful. And once again, a reverse onus. And they could leave no evidence from the facts we had that it wasn't part of their decision making. And it doesn't have to be the whole of their decision making. What is very clear from Sally is it was a substantial part of it. And that's enough for adverse action. So we're going pretty well. If Terry suffered a psychological injury, God, your lips have got hold of my brain.
Oh, come on.
I can't believe it. I'm starting to have trouble saying psychological. Would the rejection by Sally be a viable workers' claim? Yes, absolutely. Clearly not reasonable management action. Okay, yep. So now the last one's a beauty, isn't it? The business had zero tolerance for alcohol during working hours, which was 6:30 to 6 p.m. Drinking at these functions started at 6:01. Could Sally be disciplined for encouraged drinking in breach of Rhino's policies? The answer is because this was a function which was organised regular under the purview of a senior person who continued to be at it and encouraged it, it is still work. And therefore, she is liable under their policies and it would be serious misconduct in the circumstances. Mm-hmm. How about that, guys? It was an interesting problem, isn't it?
It is.
And it just shows you one or two of those facts missing and you're back to where Van Vanten was, our earlier case of struggling to say, well, where is the linkage between what is safe and what is not safe? Certainly in a Victorian or New South Wales jurisdiction, they win every time in this case. Okay. Great, that's the end of it. There's coffee not that far away. And thank you very much for joining us. It's been a really enjoyable and fun day. So
it has been. Only a few more left, Andrew.
And then we have the live one.
Yes.
We don't even know how we're doing it live, other than we both have to come and be alive. That's what we know.
No, it'll be good. It'll be good. Well, look, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next week.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.